27 Hunters Road and 42 Whero Ave. And we've got Bruce. And we've had a couple of presentations, 2 deputations on this one from the community board and one from a resident, Richard Sucker.
So I'll leave it to Stuart to lead.
Yeah, thank you. As you're aware, this has been through quite a consultation process, starting with the LTP and more recently targeted consultation. And it became apparent that there was wide range of views on what should happen to the land. And I guess thanks to the Diamond Harbour community for taking the time to submit and give their feedback and come along to an evening we held over there. And I feel we've taken on pretty much all of their views in developing or proposing to have an outline development plan.
Lovely, thank you. So I've got Sarah, Mike.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in the recommendations and then the report, it says that there's support for this, but when you read the submissions and the summary of submissions, it's clear that actually only 74 of the submissions supported developing the land and 160 didn't support, but it did say, well, if you have to, then. So we wouldn't normally get a report where there's a majority against, which says the community supports.
The overwhelming impression that I got from reading these was there wasn't support for the specific 5 options that we put to the community, but there was support for amalgam of those options, and that's what this recommendation presents. It's trying to take the best of the thoughts that we had originally and what the community told us they wanted to see and put that in place. So that means rather than taking a traditional approach of we would just sell this land in line with why we've held it since 1913, that we would work with the community and further refine this and put protections on it so that we met the community's needs before we went further.
Thanks.
Mike?
Thank you. Just
Andrew.
curious around the decision-making process of the outline development plan, and does it come to council for a final decision once it's gone through the community?
I believe it will.
Yes.
In terms of, climate change impacts and also biodiversity gains that can be achieved through these land parcels, is that incorporated into the outline plan with some bottom lines right from the get-go?
We need to work that through with the community in terms of bottom lines, but absolutely climate change is one of the key things that is front and centre. You'll see from the comments we've made, we've looked at it from the perspective of what are the specific site aspects and the mitigation, adaptation and risk aspects, as well as the broader environment. It was interesting through this process that we started to identify that some of this land could be really suitable for those communities that may need to retreat on the peninsula and finding alternative residential areas on the peninsula for those. So that was something I didn't expect, but is an interesting perspective as well. So we'll certainly be taking that climate change lens through that ODP process.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Thank you. The outline development plan obviously looks at what would occur on that land. There were a number of issues that were raised by submitters, and that certainly would be a concern, relating to effects of development not on that land. So effects on infrastructure, so roading and reticulated water infrastructure. And I'm interested to what extent any outline development plan would take those external factors into account, but also bearing in mind that we as a council declared a climate and ecological emergency, And given that what we're trying to do at a high level is to achieve carbon reduction and get more people walking, cycling and using public transport, it's difficult to see how development of this piece of land could correlate with those aspirations.
Yep.
So those external factors, how will they be taken into account?
So the first part, those infrastructure aspects and the ability to service the lots set the carrying capacity and what can be done on the land. So they will definitely need to be taken into account. Had some very, very high-level preliminary discussions, and I think the transport ones will be the key aspects from those discussions. In terms of, again, how this could contribute to our response to climate change. At the moment, the majority of the land is very heavily modified, bare land, grazed, what you're creating on it is residential, so there clearly will be some carbon costs of that development, and unless there's some employment included in it, the employment opportunities being elsewhere would also generate potential emissions coming from it. But equally, you've got some opportunities here, and the community have identified them, that they want us to create spaces for ageing in place, and for the elderly to be able to stay in the community. So creating those opportunities cannot potentially offset further emissions associated with people moving elsewhere and then having visits to them. So I think that we'll need to look very closely through that, look at seeing how we can incorporate carbon accounting into the planning phase and work that in the best way. And as I said before, this may also be that retreat resettlement location for other areas on the peninsula if people wanted to remain in their peninsula communities. But we do need to be starting to think about them finding safer locations away from where sea level rise will affect them.
Melanie?
I was just wondering about the process of creating the outline development plan, like who's involved and how, like do they select a panel or what happens?
Yeah, so that's something we would work with the community to work the best mechanism through to do that. We would certainly need those professional advisors, consultants to do that. We haven't turned our mind totally. We wanted to get the strategic direction from you as councillors first. But I could see certainly that we could work with the community steering board to establish this and work forward from there. So we can't do this alone. We need that community support.
I've got Sarah, then Tim.
Thanks. So following on from the stuff around climate, is it actually legally possible, despite good intentions, for us to restrict any house purchases on the site to people who already live in existing Banks Peninsula communities impacted by climate change, or are looking for like a social housing kind of thing? I mean, is it even possible for us legally to restrict who is able to purchase those?
Yeah, I'd need to take that on notice. There's certainly mechanisms around, but how legally binding those are, I don't know. So I'd need to take that question on notice.
Yeah, I don't see how we're going to be able, good intentions, we need to provide somewhere for people in 20 or 30 years' time to look at shifting from some of the coastal areas around Teddington or something. But, I can't see that falling under this process.
We could get advice on development covenants, because it'd be done by covenants if it was able to be done. We can get advice on it. Yeah.
Yep.
I've got Tim and then Phil.
Thank you. And looking at this, I think there's some really good positives here with regards to the cemetery. I think that's a really good way forward. And I think many semi-rural and rural areas, if they had a fire service and the emergency helicopter pad side by side, many communities would dream of that. So I think that could be a really good thing for the future. I think it's incredibly practical. So maybe that's something to kind of focus on. My only concern is throughout the city we have issues with regards to plans for our reserves, etc., and the maintenance. So hopefully we're not promising anything, because you did say before that the outlined development plan isn't on the annual plan. There's no funding for that. So I wouldn't want to go promising things that haven't even been delivered to those things that are already in and have been in the annual plan and long-term plan for some time.
Yeah, so what we're exploring is, because the outcome of this is potential revenue for council, as well as those community benefits, that we could expend, use borrowings as a cost of potential sale to do this work forward, and do it without having to go through rates funding for it. So that's what we're working through with the finance department at the moment, to see whether that can work.
So the outline development plan comes back to council.
Definitely via the community board. I'm sure that Tori would be throwing things at me if I didn't say that part.
Yeah, but the community board looks at it first, and then makes a recommendation to council. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Phil?
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Just so I'm on the right track, the money that we get from grazing it doesn't pay the rates to it? No. And we've owned it since not we, Banks Peninsula have owned it since 1913?
Yep.
Okay. And it is all zone residential. I think what you're doing here is great, especially when you think about working with the community, not sell it off as a whole block, sell it off in little bits, or not the gullies, the flat pieces, to create a demand. It will also give us more people living over there with rates. And very roughly speaking, if there is 200 sections there over the whole lot in the very long term, that's the thick end of $6 million worth of development contributions that we could do with here. The infrastructure that we were talking about, someone was talking about before, Diamond Harbour is hooked up to the city council system as far as water and sewer goes, isn't it?
That's my understanding from brief discussions with Helen previously.
Yeah. So it's not as if we have to redesign another whole sewer system. So I think it's a good initiative, and good on you. Thank you.
And development contributions would be generated also for infrastructure. Yeah.
So you'd have to check capacity as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that's the questions. Would someone like to move this? Andrew, seconded by Aaron.
Sorry, it's just asking for that climate change adaptation and ability for locals to age in place be prioritised during considerations of the development, in the development, rather than just being a straight, sell off to whoever. It's just to get those community outcomes.
We may need to get advice on that. I mean, it's coming back to the council, so
yeah, but that's after it's been done. It's just that I think it needs. Otherwise, it's adding additional people and population to the area rather than.
But is it?
Advice on?
No, because
it's
they're
only
going
it's a
ahead with the
consideration.
outline development plan. So,
Yeah.
but it's as far as possible. It's. If they come back and say that there is...
Yeah. If they don't, they don't.
no
I mean, if
ability,
it's not
yeah.
possible. Yeah.
So,
It just gets it seriously looked at rather than a cursory.
So is it seriously considered rather than prioritise?
I don't mind the climate change part.
Yeah.
but
Prioritising
what about
considerations.
just adding the words as far as possible? I don't know. I'm just looking for some words that...
It's in considerations. It's not binding.
So perhaps after climate change adaptation, put and seriously consider there. It might be.
Well, no, because they both go. They're both
they
things
both
we
go
want.
together.
No, I don't think they do. climate change is definitely should be prioritised.
Yeah, but they
But
they
I'm not sure
will-
if we can.
the results are the same.
Okay.
Is that okay to just
Yeah.
add those
Yeah.
with? Yeah. Okay. Is the
Just
mover
needs-
and seconder, are the mover and seconder comfortable with that?
Yes. I mean, this is just for the
Outline.
plan, so it's going to come back for further consideration anyway.
The
Yep,
ODP's
I
got
am.
to come back
Yeah.
here.
Just ask one question. How can we prioritise it without advice?
We can prioritise climate change, but I don't think you can prioritise.
But back to
who
Dawn's
lives
original
there.
point around getting actual advice, it just seems a
This
bit...
is being, yeah, this is being sold to us on the basis of.
I was kind of asking the staff if that's okay.
The advice will come back when the outline development plan comes back. So
It'll go to the people who are doing the outline development plan. That's where the advice will go initially.
We could request staff advice on the outline
Here we go.
development plan.
Staff are going to give advice.
Look,
Oh, great.
councillors,
Mark is our.
I think we're really comfortable. I probably prefer seriously consider, but that's just semantics. We need to, anyway, in all of our decision making, not just this, consider climate change. Your instructions to us are there.
Yeah.
So everything we do, that is important consideration. And certainly, I think that the community has talked about that variety of houses and homes and things for ageing in place.
Yeah.
They will drive that. But you also know that I've got the housing portfolio, so housing is going to be front and centre for all ages as well. So I'm entirely happy with that. We can make sure that those are important considerations because they will be through this process.
Yeah. So, I mean, you require prioritise. You do prioritise climate change adaptation anyway. Yeah.
As far as possible needs to remain in there.
Yeah. So we'll just leave it as it is. Yeah. Yeah. Are you okay with that? Okay. You may not be happy, but is that okay?
Bruce just said it's already done. I'm just not
climate-
sure what we're
Happy to
Change
second
adaptation is not
Fine.
the other one.
what we're trying to achieve, because depending on who says it, you might say that putting anyone that far away from the city has a bigger carbon footprint than buying an apartment downtown. So you'd
But if
say
they're
no.
already living out there, that's the point.
Keeping
there.
people who are already living
The
there.
point is that they're already living out there.
Not on the new sections, they're not.
No, but if
people
they're ageing in
switching
place,
downsizing.
then rather than move them, I mean, that's our issue around the outer areas not building enough social housing or older person's
New people
housing.
are coming into the old houses.
No, some of those old houses will be disappearing with climate change. That's the point.
I'm happy.
Yep.
Maybe Sarah can second.
Should be the last 1,000
Aaron's not.
houses left.
I'm happy to second it if you don't want to. Or we can put it as an amendment and you guys can vote on climate change. It's fine.
Do we,
At least I got
does it
virtues.
matter? Sorry, seriously. Sorry, excuse me.
Sorry, mini jury's been read.
Excuse me, are you comfortable to let this go through?
Yeah, based on what Bruce's answer was.
Yep, thank you. Right, I'll open it up for debate. It's been moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Kewen. Andrew?
Thank you. So it was good that this was pulled out of the standard disposal process in last year's long-term plan, and that it was dealt with separately in the way that we're seeing today. And it's important to remember that the very reason we did that was in response to community submissions to the long-term plan and concerns with the process we'd put in place, particularly as regarded these two bits of land. So the gullies and the ecology that they contain do need a high level of protection. That came through loud and clear in the submissions and in the community board discussion. The expectation of the community is that long term, this will be achieved through the protection that's provided by reserve status, realising that that would take longer than putting a covenant in place. But the view certainly is that that's the only way that the required level of protection for the gullies and the ecology that they contain can be achieved. And similarly, the walking tracks need to be properly protected in perpetuity, either by easements or other suitable legal instruments. So if development is to occur, and clearly there's some support for that, then community concerns with such development needs to be addressed and taken into account. And there's an opportunity here to achieve some wider community benefits from any development of this land or any change in use. So an outline development plan proposed to be done in conjunction with the community seems to be a sensible approach. It'll allow for further community input. It'll allow for community aspirations to be properly considered and to be achieved, and for further consideration by council. And it's no surprise that communities are concerned about change and how it might affect their community. We need to make sure that any effect is positive rather than negative. The concerns about infrastructure, roading and reticulated services in particular need to be taken into account, and we've been given assurance that there will be. And everything I'm talking about, these are all concerns that formed part of the community board's discussion and concerns that were raised there, but in the context of the board's majority support for the proposed approach that we see here. It's worth noting, and it came through in the deputation, that the community generally didn't support 100% of the land being developed, that a number of good proposals and suggestions for features providing community benefit and greater amenity were proposed, and all of those things can be taken into account through this process. We just need to make sure that the next stage involves significant and well thought out opportunities for community input, and that the result really reflects the aspirations of the community. There's actually an opportunity here for this to be an exemplary development that achieves community benefit along with an appropriate level of staged development at the same time. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and this isn't, and it's great that we're adopting the way to it today.
Sarah?
Thanks. Let's be clear, if one of our neighbouring districts was proposing, and they have been, new developments outside infrastructure boundaries, we have a standard position as a council of saying, actually, that's not particularly good for us because it's going to increase our costs when it comes to roading and maintenance, use of facilities, and a range of different things. So we have to be really clear here that when we do develop in areas that will be stretched when it comes to resources, that we're doing it for the right reasons and in the right way. And having council in control of the outline development plan in conjunction with the community gives us the opportunity to do that and to allow for people to age in place, for some managed retreat over time, and to use this as a long-term project over decades rather than as one to sort of flick off assets and make a quick buck is essential. And so not just selling straight away, but actually being really careful about how we manage this over a period of time is going to be essential both for the existing community and for the future community there. Diamond Harbour is an amazing place to live. People would like to stay there, but they're sometimes stuck in homes that are too large, but they want to be part of their community. Providing some social housing in the area would be really useful, but also some space for people to retreat when seafront properties become unviable is really important. Thanks.
Right, I shall put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And opposition to point 6, Sam McDonald. And
have you got me on that, Leanne? Item 6.
James
Goff. Thank you.
No, Phil Major and James Goff. Thank you. All right, well, I'm just going to adjourn. Excuse me. I'm just going to adjourn for morning tea. So if we could reconvene at 25 minutes to 12.